Chapter 1. The Future of New Albuquerque. New Albuquerque, a gleaming metropolis set 200 years in the future, is a city of unparalleled innovation and breathtaking architecture designed to support the transport of humans to the moon. As the central hub for lunar travel, New Albuquerque is the world's most advanced city, offering a seamless blend of modernity and history. This city was built from the ground up with one purpose in mind: to be the launch point for the privileged few who can afford the luxury of visiting the moon. The Lunar Resort, an exclusive getaway for the rich and powerful, has become a symbol of opulence and excess. It is a destination for extravagant weddings and somber funerals alike, attracting the elite of Earth who seek to commemorate life's milestones in the cold serenity of space. The city itself mirrors the extravagance of the Lunar Resort. Its design is both functional and awe-inspiring, with sleek skyscrapers and high-tech transport systems crisscrossing the landscape. At the heart of New Albuquerque is a grand river walk, dividing the city into two distinct zones. On one side of the river lies the residential district, home to the city's permanent residents. This side of the city features expansive parks, where towering trees provide shade for joggers and families enjoying the outdoors. The park's centerpiece is a vast green space, surrounded by two enormous residential towers, which rise like twin sentinels overseeing the area. The lower levels of the towers are teeming with cafes, restaurants, and entertainment venues, making this part of the city as lively as it is picturesque. On the other side of the river, the tourist district is a playground for those who come to New Albuquerque with leisure in mind. Luxury shopping centers line the streets, offering everything from designer fashion to the latest in cutting-edge technology. At the heart of this area is a 24-hour food court where visitors can sample cuisines from around the world. It's a place where locals and tourists alike gather to enjoy a bite at any hour of the day or night. Beyond the food court, visitors can explore endless entertainment options, from holographic concerts to immersive virtual reality experiences, ensuring that no one ever grows bored. One of the city's crowning jewels is its climate control system, which maintains perfect temperatures and air quality year-round, no matter the weather outside. The city has been designed to be a utopia, with no expense spared in making it as comfortable and luxurious as possible. It is, after all, the most advanced city on Earth, where technology and nature coexist in perfect harmony. Amidst all this luxury, one of New Albuquerque's most famous establishments is a sushi restaurant, renowned for its fresh, exquisite offerings. Known as the Lunar Sushi Restaurant, this world-famous eatery is open 24 hours a day, serving the finest sushi made from fish caught by the sushi chefs themselves in a massive aquarium built into the restaurant. The chefs are experts in their craft, selecting only the best catches to prepare dishes that have made the restaurant a culinary destination in its own right. To mirror the success of the lunar location, a second sushi restaurant has been opened in New Albuquerque, bringing a taste of the moon's exclusivity to Earth. New Albuquerque may be a city of the future, but it is also a city steeped in luxury, designed to cater to those who can afford to live in its orbit. With its sleek designs, cutting-edge technology, and world-class amenities, it stands as a testament to what humanity has achieved and what is yet to come. Chapter 2. Meet Alex. Alex stepped off the Hyperloop from the airport, eyes wide as he took in the sight of New Albuquerque. The city gleamed under the setting sun, an urban masterpiece perched on the edge of the desert, humming with the excitement of modern life. He was here for a week-long vacation on the moon, a dream trip he'd been planning with his college friends for months. It was his first time leaving Seattle in years, and he was eager for a break from the relentless grind of his career. The past 2 years had been a whirlwind, working long hours, climbing the corporate ladder, and enjoying a lifestyle that, while successful, left little room for fun. Now he was ready to reclaim the joy of his younger years. This trip to the moon was more than just a vacation. It was a symbol of how far he and his friends had come since their college days. His friends were coming from all over: New York, London, Miami. And this was their first time reuniting since graduation. The plan was simple: relive their college days, indulge in golf and poker tournaments, and enjoy all the luxuries the moon had to offer. It wasn't just about the adventure. It was about celebrating how far they had all come, now successful professionals in their own right. The moon was the ultimate symbol of their success. For Alex, it was a chance to unwind and reconnect, to take a step back from the pressures of work, and experience a new world with the friends who had been his constant support through everything. When Alex arrived at his hotel, he was greeted by the striking view from his room. The expansive window overlooked the city, with its winding streets and the lunar transport hub where shuttles departed for the moon. The sun's rays reflected off the high-rise buildings, casting long shadows over the city. He arrived a day early, knowing that one of his favorite bands was performing live that evening, and he didn't want to miss it. His friends wouldn't be arriving until Friday, so he had a little time to himself to explore New Albuquerque, soak in the atmosphere, and get reacquainted with the city's futuristic charm. Later that evening, Alex decided to treat himself to some sushi at one of the city's world-famous sushi restaurants. He knew his friends weren't big fans, so this was the perfect time to indulge solo. After a quick look through the menu, he made his way to the beverage bar. He was in no rush. Tonight, it was just about relaxing, enjoying a drink, and savoring some fresh sushi. The ambiance of the bar was sophisticated yet casual, with sleek countertops and low, ambient lighting. He took a seat and ordered a cocktail while he perused the drink list. A beautiful woman took the seat next to him, and for a brief moment, Alex thought about striking up a conversation. But before he could say anything, her boyfriend appeared, joining her at the bar. They shared a quick, private exchange before they stood and left, without so much as a glance at Alex. He wasn't bothered, of course. It was part of the vibe here. New Albuquerque was filled with people, most of them more interested in their own lives than anyone else's. The bartender, a calm and observant figure, glanced over at Alex with a knowing smile. "Don't worry," he said, cleaning a glass. "There are plenty of single women in New Albuquerque." Alex chuckled lightly, realizing the bartender was probably right. He raised his glass, relaxed, and prepared to enjoy the evening on his own, with the promise of even more adventures ahead. Chapter 3. The Alien Bartender. Alex's laughter echoed through the bar as the bartender leaned in slightly, watching him with a quiet intensity. The smooth hum of the city outside faded into the background as the bartender took a step closer. "You won't believe this," the bartender said with a sly grin, his voice low, almost conspiratorial. "I'm actually an alien from Zeta Prime. We have advanced technology that makes us look human so we can assimilate into the human population." Alex paused mid-laugh, a confused smile spreading across his face. He looked over at the bartender, unsure if he was being pranked or if this was some elaborate joke. But the bartender's calm demeanor suggested he wasn't kidding. "Come on," Alex said, still chuckling. "An alien? Really?" He took a sip from his beer, expecting the bartender to break into laughter, but the alien just stood there, watching him with those knowing eyes. "It's true," the bartender continued, his voice steady. "We've been living here for quite some time. Earth isn't the first planet we've visited. We have technology that makes us blend in, look like humans, so we can observe without being detected. It's easier this way. Safer." Alex shook his head, trying to wrap his mind around what the bartender had just said. "Zeta Prime? Aliens living among us? That's a little far-fetched, don't you think?" Alex laughed again, more out of disbelief than amusement. The idea was absurd. He took another swig of his drink, still thinking this was some elaborate setup for a practical joke. "Think what you will," the bartender replied. "But there's more. The government, they know about us. They've been keeping us secret for years. In fact, there's a facility in northern New Mexico, a place called Dulce. It's not just a research facility. It's a place where aliens like me are kept, hidden away from the public. You can't see it, but it's there, tucked away beneath the surface, and soon the truth will come out. In fact, New Albuquerque was originally built for the Dulce staff. The Hyperloop stops at the airport and goes on to Dulce. Because of its proximity to Dulce, they picked this location for the moon transport." Alex stared at him, wide-eyed. He was almost ready to laugh again when a plate of sushi was placed before him. The bartender expertly arranged the dish, setting down 2 rolls. "Here's your Las Vegas roll and New Albuquerque roll," he said. "Enjoy." Alex's curiosity momentarily shifted from aliens to sushi as he picked up his chopsticks and tasted the new Albuquerque roll. Immediately, his face turned red. The roll was filled with hatch peppers and cream cheese, and it was more than just spicy. It was burning. His throat seemed to catch fire, and he chugged his beer, trying to cool down, but it did little to help. The heat intensified, and before he knew it, Alex began hiccuping uncontrollably, his eyes watering from the spice. The bartender smiled sympathetically and slid an ice-cold glass of water over to him. "Here," the bartender said, his tone calm. "Drink this and breathe into this bag." Alex grabbed the water, gulping it down, but still, the hiccups wouldn't stop. The bartender quickly handed him a small paper bag, and Alex started breathing in and out, slowly at first, but soon enough the hiccups began to subside. His face flushed from the heat and the effort, his eyes still red from the spice. "Did they know the roll was that hot?" Alex asked, half laughing, still catching his breath. "It says hot, but that was, well, ridiculous." The bartender chuckled softly. "They know," he said. "But it's meant to challenge you, builds character or something like that." Before Alex could respond, the bartender's hollow display flickered on, casting a soft blue light across the bar. The bartender swiped at the air, dismissing the projection. Once it was gone, he turned to Alex, a more serious expression crossing his face. "Listen, I need your help," the bartender said, his voice lowering. "There's something happening, something I can't fix alone. Dulcie has aliens and time travel, and the timeline's been messed with, and I need someone to help me set it right." Alex blinked, the words barely registering. He was still trying to catch his breath from the spice, but the bartender's earnest tone made it clear he wasn't joking this time. "Dulcie doesn't believe me. I tried to warn them," the bartender explained. Chapter 4. The Timeline. Anomaly. The bartender leaned in, his expression serious. "The thing is, Alex, my people can't know about time travel. My people are not all good. The truth is that my tribe of Zeta were expelled from Zeta Prime for trying to assassinate the Zeta King. If humans ever found out, the consequences would be catastrophic. The balance we've worked so hard to maintain would collapse." Alex was silent, his mind racing. Time travel? Aliens? This was all too much. "I can't do this alone," the bartender continued, his voice low. "No one else can help me. There's a hiccup in the timeline, something that shouldn't be here, and it's starting to unravel everything. I've tried to fix it on my own, but it's too big. I need your help, Alex." Alex still wasn't sure if this was a joke or if he'd somehow stumbled into a wild conspiracy. But the bartender's tone was unwavering. He wasn't messing around. "My shift ends soon," the bartender said, looking at the clock. "We should go to Dulcie. You'll see the time machine for yourself. If Dulcie wants to help, you can go on your merry way. If not, then it's up to us to figure out what went wrong and prevent time from spiraling out of control." Alex stared at him, the weight of the situation sinking in. Was this really happening? Was he about to walk into some secret government facility and get a first-hand look at time travel? He wasn't sure what to think, but the bartender's eyes were full of resolve. There was no turning back now. The only question left was whether he would help, and whether he could even begin to understand what he was about to get involved in. Chapter 5. The Journey to Dulcie. Alex followed the bartender through the sleek, futuristic city streets, heading toward the Hyperloop station. The city's cutting-edge design was reflected in the gleaming, high-speed transport system that was about to whisk them away. The Hyperloop was a marvel of engineering, an enclosed tunnel that traveled at supersonic speeds, gliding smoothly through the Earth's crust with minimal friction. The interior was all soft, ambient lighting and comfortable seating designed for maximum efficiency and comfort. The moment they entered the pod, Alex felt a strange mix of excitement and unease. The bartender casually explained that the Hyperloop was the fastest mode of transport available, capable of reaching speeds faster than a commercial jet. "We'll be in Dulcie in no time," he said, a hint of amusement in his voice as the pod started with a soft hum. quickly gaining speed. The outside world blurred as they rocketed through the tunnel, the city fading into the distance as they traveled underground. Alex marveled at the technology, wondering how something so advanced could be hidden from the public eye. The Hyperloop's smooth motion made the entire ride feel almost like floating, effortless, as if they weren't traveling at all, but instead had simply slipped into another world. Soon, the Hyperloop slowed and arrived at its destination, Dulce, a remote location in northern New Mexico. The facility was far from ordinary. Beneath the surface, a massive complex stretched out, with secure levels dedicated to research and time travel operations. The bartender led Alex down a series of hallways, eventually arriving at a sleek metal door that required Alex to sign a non-disclosure agreement, NDA. The paperwork was brief but stern, violate the confidentiality, and Alex would face severe penalties, even imprisonment. The time machine, it seemed, was a closely guarded secret. Once the formalities were complete, they entered the time travel level. It was as sterile and high-tech as any research facility, with walls lined with monitors, holograms, and computer screens. In the center of the room stood the time machine, a massive, round device resembling a giant doorframe. The machine itself hummed softly with energy, its surface gleaming under the fluorescent lights. It looked like something out of a science fiction movie, an object capable of transporting people to another time with a simple step through its glowing threshold. They were greeted by Dr. Swanson, the head of the time travel program. Dr. Swanson was a tall man with sharp features, his demeanor cool and skeptical. The bartender quickly explained the situation, how they believed a time anomaly was threatening to destabilize the future. He spoke of the rogue human from the past who was inexplicably in the present, wreaking havoc on the timeline. Dr. Swanson listened, his expression unreadable, then dismissed their concerns. "Time hiccups," he scoffed. "The future would never allow such a thing. We've analyzed the time machine thoroughly. It came from the future, and any problems would have been detected long before now." Alex and the bartender tried to push back, showing Dr. Swanson the evidence, footage of the rogue human from the past causing chaos in New Albuquerque. But Dr. Swanson remained unconvinced, his resistance clear. "This is irrelevant," he said firmly. "There's no issue here. You're both imagining things." Frustrated, the bartender exchanged a glance with Alex. Dr. Swanson wasn't going to help them. It was up to them to figure out what had gone wrong with the timeline, and how to fix it before it spiraled further out of control. Chapter 6. Capturing the Rogue Human. Alex and the bartender set out through the city, the quiet hum of New Albuquerque's futuristic atmosphere around them. The hunt for the rogue human was on, and the bartender was determined to track him down before he could disappear again. Using a sleek piece of alien technology, the bartender quickly activated the carbon dating tool, which scanned the air around them. In real time, it assessed the molecular composition of everything, pinpointing the rogue human's unique carbon footprint. "Got him," the bartender muttered, staring at the holographic display. "Still wearing clothes from 2025. If he changes outfits, it'll be harder to track him, so we need to move fast." They followed the trail, weaving through the city until the carbon trace led them to a bustling baseball stadium. The New Mexico Hatch expansion team was playing, a game that was drawing a large crowd. "He's in there," the bartender said. "Let's wait until the game ends. There's only one exit." Alex nodded, glancing around as people filed out of the stadium, excited chatter filling the air. The bartender's eyes scanned the crowd, the tool tracking the rogue human's signature. As the game concluded, the crowd began to thin out, and soon they spotted him, a man who didn't belong, his outdated 2025 attire standing out in the futuristic crowd. The rogue human darted through the exit, but the bartender and Alex were ready. They sprinted toward the man, but the rogue noticed them and bolted into the night. The chase was on. The riverwalk stretched ahead, bathed in the soft glow of what looked like delicate candles. They weren't real flames, but decorative boxes that mimicked the flicker of Asian-style lanterns, casting a warm light over the path. The rogue man zigzagged between the lights, but Alex and the bartender were close behind. Suddenly, the rogue boarded a gondola, which was silently gliding across the river. The gondola's driver was a robot, its mechanical hands gripping the controls with precision. The bartender didn't hesitate. Without a word, he turned to Alex, and with a nod, they pursued. They followed the gondola as it drifted through the water, the faint sound of its engine humming in the night air. As they got closer, the bartender timed his move perfectly. He jumped into the other gondola, landing silently on the boat. In one swift motion, he grabbed the rogue human, who had barely registered their presence. The bartender injected him with a quick-acting sedative, and within seconds, the man slumped unconscious. The bartender wiped his hands on his coat, satisfied with the quick and clean capture. Alex stared at the unconscious man in the boat, his heart racing. "What now?" "Now," the bartender said, "we make sure he gets to Dulcie." They exited the gondola, carefully transferring the rogue human into a nearby wheelchair. It wasn't glamorous, but it would work. Together, they wheeled the unconscious man across the riverwalk, heading for the Hyperloop station where the real work would begin. The night air was thick with tension, and Alex couldn't shake the feeling that things were just beginning to spiral out of control. Chapter 7. The Badge from the Past. The rogue human was still unconscious, slumped in the wheelchair as Alex and the bartender wheeled him through the halls of Dulcie's time travel level. The sterile environment felt colder as they approached Dr. Swanson's lab, where the time machine hummed softly in the background, like the heartbeat of the facility. Dr. Swanson had agreed to meet them after they captured the rogue human, though Alex could sense the scientist's skepticism lingering in the air. The rogue human's clothes, unchanged since they'd first tracked him down, were a clear giveaway that something was off. But now, it was the badge he wore around his neck that would tell the real story. Alex stared at the old, faded badge, an artifact from a Taos resort that hadn't existed for over a century. It looked like a relic from a bygone era, a time long lost in history. The words on the badge were barely legible. Taos Resort, Staff Access, 2025. The bartender examined the badge closely, a slight frown creasing his brow. This shouldn't be possible, he murmured, his alien senses picking up something off about the artifact. This man shouldn't be here! Alex's heart skipped a beat. The badge was the key, the piece of evidence that tied the rogue human to a past that no longer existed. It wasn't just an oddity, it was a signal of something much worse. A fracture in the timeline, a tear in history that allowed this man to slip through and appear in the future. The timeline, it seemed, had been corrupted, and the consequences could be catastrophic if it wasn't fixed. They brought the rogue human into Dr. Swanson's lab. The moment the scientist laid eyes on him, he immediately began running diagnostics on the unconscious man, his fingers flying across a holographic interface as he initiated a series of scans. Dr. Swanson had always been dismissive of any notion that time travel could go awry, but now, with the rogue human before him, he couldn't ignore the mounting evidence. The scans hummed and beeped, displaying detailed genetic readings, time signatures, and an array of other scientific data. Finally, Dr. Swanson paused, his gaze narrowing as the final scan results flickered on the screen. "Impossible," he muttered, his eyes widening in disbelief. "This man, he's from 2025. He should have never made it here." Alex stood still, his mind racing. The rogue human had somehow slipped through time, a casualty of the fractured timeline. Dr. Swanson turned to them, his skepticism replaced by grim realization. "This is bad," he said, his voice heavy with concern. "This man's presence here. This is connected to our project to 2025. If we don't address it, this fracture could unravel the future. We must let my assistant know she is in charge of that project." Alex felt a cold shiver run down his spine. The bartender's earlier warning about the timeline spiraling out of control suddenly felt all too real. The rogue human wasn't just lost, he was a ticking time bomb, threatening everything that was yet to come. "How do we fix this?" Alex asked, his voice tight with urgency. Dr. Swanson shook his head. "I don't know,
but we have to act fast. If we don't, who knows what the consequences will be.
Chapter 8. Felicia's Discovery. Felicia sat in her sleek minimalist office, surrounded by holographic monitors displaying data from across the timeline. Her eyes scanned the streams of information, searching for any sign of irregularities, something that might explain the growing sense of unease that had been gnawing at her for days. The timeline was supposed to be a well-ordered system, a delicate balance of cause and effect. But something was off. She could feel it in her bones, an unsettling ripple in the fabric of time. It wasn't until she checked the latest anomaly report that the pieces started falling into place. The rogue human, someone who shouldn't even be alive in this time, was a critical piece in understanding what was going wrong. She studied the data more closely. The man had somehow slipped through a tear in the timeline, his presence in the future a clear sign of a deeper problem. As the head of the time travel program in 2025, Felicia had seen her fair share of anomalies. But this one was different. This man, who was clearly from the past, had appeared at just the wrong moment. The ripple she had detected in the timeline yesterday was now unmistakable, and it all seemed to be linked to this rogue human. Her fingers hovered over her console, quickly pulling up more information about the anomaly. She traced it back to the same moment, a fracture that had occurred within the last 48 hours. It wasn't just a random occurrence. Someone had deliberately manipulated the timeline to allow a person from the past to enter the future. And she now understood that the rogue human wasn't a mistake. He was part of something much larger. Felicia exhaled sharply. She wasn't surprised. She had suspected something like this might happen, but now the reality was sinking in. She checked the clock. It was too late to stop the process. The time machine, the key to all of this, was already set for tomorrow. At noon, the machine would arrive in the future, and the man's fate would be sealed. She leaned back in her chair, her mind racing. She wasn't entirely sure what the consequences would be, but she knew they would be profound. The rogue human wasn't just an innocent bystander. His presence here meant that something, or someone, was trying to change the future, to manipulate it in ways that Felicia couldn't yet understand. She could feel the weight of the decision that lay ahead. As if on cue, a message flashed across one of her screens. Asset Eve arriving tomorrow, noon. Felicia's stomach tightened. Eve had been her trusted colleague, someone she'd worked with for years. But this time, Eve was more than just a coworker. She was part of the solution, or at least Felicia hoped she was. Together, they would have to untangle the mess that had been created. They would have to figure out who or what was behind this tampering with time. Felicia took a deep breath, preparing herself for the next phase of the plan. The pieces were falling into place, but she had no illusions about how difficult it would be to fix what had been broken. The timeline was fragile, and it was up to her and Eve to restore it before it was too late. Chapter 9. Eve's Arrival. The morning arrived with an air of quiet tension. Felicia stood at the time machine, waiting. She had spent the last several hours analyzing every shred of data she could gather on the rogue human and the anomaly that had destabilized the timeline. She knew Eve's arrival was crucial, but there was still a feeling of unease gnawing at her. Something about this situation didn't sit right. As the clock hit noon, Felicia's heart skipped a beat. Out stepped Eve, the journalist from 2025. She looked different, younger. There was a sharpness in her eyes, a weariness in the way she carried herself, as if the journey through the broken timeline had already begun to take its toll. Eve, Felicia greeted her with a small, relieved smile. Welcome to 2025. Eve nodded, her gaze scanning the surroundings with quiet intensity. I've got bad news, she said. I was here yesterday. I went to sleep last night and woke up back home in my bed. Her tone was calm but heavy, as though she were already mentally preparing for what lay ahead. The tension was palpable, but Felicia could tell that Eve was ready. They both knew what they were facing. Felicia led Eve to meet Dr. Swanson. He was in the control room where the rogue human had been secured. The man was still unconscious, his breathing steady as he lay in a holding cell. Eve approached the man, her eyes narrowing as she took in the evidence. the badge from the long-gone Teos resort, the man's strange presence in a time that wasn't his own. Felicia had already pieced together much of the puzzle, but Eve would bring the insight they needed to complete it. There is something wrong with him. Something is destabilizing his cells. I don't think he will live more than a few hours, Dr. Slauson informed the women. You know what? We saw him yesterday. Eve asked, her voice quiet but firm. Yesterday? Felicia asked. Well, during my first trip, we walked past him in New Albuquerque, and I had the strangest feeling of déjà vu, Eve said. Eve examined the man carefully, her mind already working through the possible causes of the anomaly. I think I remember seeing him in the lab before I got in the time machine the first time, she explained. Felicia shook her head. That's what we need to figure out. I don't understand how he could have gotten here. The time machine was carefully calibrated so only you could go through it. Eve exhaled slowly. Then we better go to the cloning lab and get that out of the way so we have time to deal with this. The urgency in Eve's voice sparked a fire in Felicia. They had one shot at this. Together, they would unravel the mystery of the rogue human and prevent the timeline from spiraling out of control. Felicia's mind raced, her thoughts aligning with Eve's. Together, they would confront the forces trying to manipulate time and ensure that the timeline, fragile as it was, would be restored. Chapter 10. Breaking the Loop. The time machine hummed softly, its presence in the lab a constant reminder of the fragile balance they were trying to maintain. Eve returned to the future again, but this time her expression was grim as she exited the time machine. The loop had to end now before the past could continue to unravel the future. I've seen it, Eve said, her voice steady despite the weight of the revelation. The past, someone in 2025, reverse-engineered the time machine, and I believe Remy has already traveled to the future. Felicia's breath caught in her throat. Remy, the tech bro from 2025, was the person behind the manipulation of time. The idea of him being in the future was troubling, especially when Eve added, "The owner of the Taos resort is a billionaire tech mogul. He wants to launch time travel tourism in 2025 to become the richest man in the world. He doesn't realize the danger he's causing." Felicia's mind raced. She had suspected that Remy might be the one behind the temporal fractures, but hearing it confirmed sent a chill through her. If Remy and the resort were allowed to thrive, time travel would become the weapon of the wealthy, with devastating consequences. Eve continued, "The only way to break the loop is to destroy the time machine before it's used to further distort the timeline. Dr. Swanson has provided me with the technology to do it. If Remy is in the future, he must not return to 2025. Felicia nodded. She understood the gravity of the situation. And once Remy dies in the future, the timeline will reset, and everything will return to normal. Yes, Eve replied. But we need to act fast. Felicia and Eve exchanged a look. They both knew the risks. This wouldn't be a round trip. If they succeeded, they'd never be able to return to the present. But the future, and the timeline, was at stake. With a heavy heart, Felicia activated the time travel console. "We'll go back to 2025, she said, "and we'll make sure this ends for good." Back in the lab, as Felicia and Eve prepared to leave, Dr. Swanson made a call. The holo display flickered to life, showing the bartender. "We need to find Remy," Dr. Swanson said. "He must be captured, and he must not be allowed to return to 2025. The bartender nodded, his face expressionless. His gaze flicked across the bar, and then, to his surprise, he saw Remy sitting alone at the counter, nursing a drink. "Remy," the bartender muttered under his breath as he mixed a new drink for Remy. He slipped something into Remy's drink, a quick-acting sedative. "This one is on the house," the bartender told Remy. Then the bartender made the call to Alex. "Bring the wheelchair to the bar. It's time to wrap this up." Alex, who had been waiting for instructions, glanced at the phone. "Understood. I'll be there soon." The bartender watched Remy sip his drink, the sedative beginning to take effect. The endgame was in motion. As Remy slumped in his seat, the bartender took one last look around.
It was almost over. The timeline would be fixed.